Tell me about the track.
We start at the start line.
Yeah, but you actually start here because you have to run to your car and I'm on.
Sure enough. So, once your old man manages to hobble over, you pull out and accelerate very hard to Dunlop Bridge, to Turn Rouge, critical first gear corner. Keep your speed up for your exit onto your sand. Long straightaway, top gear, 10 miles per hour. Then wham! You get that right, and your first 3.5 minutes of 24 hours.
The 24-hour of Le Mans has been going on as long as there's been cars, and it is essentially a track made out of country roads that forms a 3-mile loop. And I think the idea behind the race was always to test the best car in the world by applying the most demanding set of challenges to it, driving for 24 hours straight.
There's exhaustion beyond belief, not only for the drivers, but for the car. These cars have to maintain speeds, maybe a top speed of 230 miles an hour at that time, for 24 hours. Through the rain, those tires, being on a wet track, and the mental exhaustion of these men seeing cars explode to the side of them, because that happened a lot at that time. They might be their friends who are suddenly on fire.
The only thing you stop for is to refill with gas. And the roads, instead of being a kind of smooth oval track, are heinous. Difficult turns, uneven asphalt. Nothing is made friendly to the driver. It's, in that sense, the ultimate test, because you're having to do that through day, through night, through rain, through sleet, through dawn, through sunset.
Oh, piss off!
It's incredible, the courage that that takes. And that's obviously a big part of our story, was the reason these guys were able to win was because they solved that problem.
It's a time period in the 60s where car racing, it was in its infancy. There's no radios, there's barely seat belts, there wasn't a lot of computer analysis on the chassis and stuff. It was all done by people seat of the pants.
Learn to drive, you pillock!
It became clear that we needed to have a representation of every major beat of the race. So for all intents and purposes, we kind of recreated the entire track. And we had to have a mind meld and really know that track turn by turn, just like the racers did.
And action.
See this crack? That's my marker for turn 8.
But you'll be going 150 miles an hour. How do you see it?
You're going fast, but as the car speeds up, everything else slows down. You don't do that. You do this, right? And then you see everything.
The challenge of recreating Le Mans was one of the great puzzles for the production designer and myself and my DP. What we had to consider was how exactly to make this track come alive again. It didn't exist anymore, it doesn't exist anymore, meaning Le Mans still exists, and the race still exists on the same plot of land, but like everything, it looks nothing like it used to.
We had the really good fortune of being able to go to Le Mans, and the organization there, the Automobile Club de West, they really opened up their doors to us, and they took us around and gave us a tour of the track, so we got to see what it's like now. The track as it exists today is really, really different than what it was in 1966. Everything has been reclad, it's very high-tech, the turns have been engineered to a very, very high degree, and the cars are going faster now than ever before.
People who are still living, who were actually in Le Mans in those years, helped us in research. Charlie Agapou and Peter Miles, who is Ken Miles' son, both of whom are still involved in the automobile world, were both really helpful to us.
Well, 66 was kind of a race that everyone wanted to win because we'd already won Daytona and Sebring. So it was really important we won Le Mans because it would have meant the big three. And because Ken Miles was the driver of the first two, we all kind of wanted him to win anyway.
We're trying to create something that's historically accurate and still exciting and holds up to today's standards of car movies and car chases.
Bloody hell!
Recreating the Le Mans race was something that took months and months and months of effort, working closely in collaboration with just about every department on the movie.
I am a national and international licensed race official with both pro and club racing. My responsibility is to keep it as authentic as it should be with reference to the cars, to the track, and how we approach racing.
Picture cars had to be involved, stunts had to be involved, of course. Second unit was integral to the effort. Visual effects, previs, storyboards. I mean, it was really a behemoth of a sequence.
Le Mans is in a beautiful village not far from Paris and still exists on the same track of this amalgam of country roads, although I think a little better groomed than it used to be.
Back in the 1960s, it's really accurately described in the script as being a racetrack that cuts through the countryside. There were no barriers, there were no K-rails, there were no fences. It was basically farmland and a road. And that's really what made the Le Mans race really, really unique. One of the early efforts was to try to find, like, where were we going to shoot our Le Mans race? So what we were looking for is countryside that looked like the Loire Valley region in France, that's very lush and green. And pretty quickly we discovered that we weren't going to find this in California.
And what we fell upon was the idea that what was really important was some of the landmarks of the actual track. We needed a Mulsanne Straight. We needed the legendary curves of the track in some form like they really existed. And obviously we needed the straightaway into the grandstand and the pit area. Also the Dunlop Bridge, which was kind of an icon, the great curved bridge in the shape of a tire. These were all things we had to recreate or it wouldn't feel like Le Mans. The problem is there's no track in one location where we could do that. So what we ended up having to do was we found about 5 or 6 different locations.
We came to Georgia mainly because it looks as close to France as we could find anywhere. We've been shooting between Atlanta and Savannah. We shot out in Statesboro as well.
We knew that we had to represent the exit from the pits going into the Dunlop Bridge, then into the S's, and then around to the Mulsanne Straight and the Mulsanne Corner and then the White House Corner. And by the end of it, we kind of represented every single chicane and turn and straightaway on the entire track.
Not bloody good enough, Miles! Come on!
We were able to actually build the entire track out of pieces. We were fortunate enough to find 2 tracks, one here at Road Atlanta and another one called the Grand Prize track in Savannah. They allowed us pretty much full access and had the look of France with the greenery and the width of the track, and also allowed us to piece together the actual Le Mans race between the 2 locations and the country road in Statesboro.
What is a real challenge and hard to convey is that every time someone makes a full lap in our movie, they are passing through 5 or 6 different locations.
The first location is Road Atlanta, where we created a 1-to-1 scale replica of the Dunlop Bridge, which is absolutely like a time capsule because it was exactly like what that Dunlop Bridge looked like back in '66. Next 2 sections were in Savannah. One was at the Grand Prize track, just in downtown Savannah, which was really this very, very unique venue in that it hadn't been used as a racetrack in many years. And so the landscape and the vegetation had grown over a lot, and it looked very natural. It didn't look like a synthetic track. It had that sort of grown over look, which was really fantastic. Third location was 45 minutes outside of Savannah, and it was our Mulsanne Straight. And the Mulsanne Straight is several miles of just straight road. That's very, very iconic to the Le Mans race. Back then, it didn't have any chicanes, so you could just get up to maximum speed, and you were just whipping right past the countryside, and we even included these very French-looking cows on that run to make it feel authentic.
The road in Statesboro was amazing. We needed a 3-lane road so that when we track, we have a tracking vehicle like that one.
Drivers, please take your places.
In Agua Dulce, which is an airstrip just north of Los Angeles, we built all the pits. We built the Le Mans pits. which was an incredible set.
The pits today look nothing like the pits back in 1966. Those buildings were torn down in the 1980s, I think. So none of the structures around the finish line and around the pits are there anymore. All the stands have been rebuilt and everything like that. So we were really recreating an entire world that didn't exist anymore.
Here we go, guys, stand by. And background action, background!
We basically shut this place down for 4 months so that we could build the set behind us here, which is about half of the pits in Le Mans, France, as they looked in 1966. The most complicated thing was to figure out exactly how much we needed of this long building that was over 1,000 feet long. And the way that we did that was we had to really sit down and collaborate and talk about the blocking and where all the characters were going to be and how they'd experience the space. In reality, there were 55 individual pits at Le Mans. We ended up recreating about 15, 3 sections of 5.
We listened to recordings of radio announcing of tracks and how situations developed, and we watched lots of old footage. How did they change a tire back then? How did they do a refuel? We had rehearsals just of our fueling teams. How were these things done back then? Again, it wasn't the same as it is now.
The bloody door won't close!
All right.
What tools did they use? It's not the same as it is now. They all didn't have power tools.
Guys, get out of the way! Go!
The other thing I never considered, even when I took on this movie, is to do a race car movie where the cars are driving fast, you need enough road for the cars to get up to speed. So you don't just need enough road to do the scene. You need enough road before the moment you need to do your scene so the cars can get up to the kind of speed that makes the action look real.
The tricky thing is that we had to find enough runway or tarmac for the cars to get up to 150 miles an hour and also to slow down at the end. The airport was just perfect for that.
330.6. That's another record.
There's also a time of day. Is it sunset, night? Is it raining? So if we shot the scenes at the grandstand at dawn or sunset or with noon light, these scenes have to be shot at noon light.
Half of the race takes place at night, so we had to take that into consideration when we were designing the set with all the practical lighting that had to be designed as a part of the look.
Rain's coming.
All right.
Came up pretty early with the idea that the Ferrari should have yellow headlights. We got all these night sequences. It's going to be mostly lights and rain. You want to identify the Ferraris quickly, and so we said, let's go yellow headlights on the Ferraris and the warm whites on the GTs.
We started with historical reference, and we basically went through and mashed every single light that we could find in the hundreds and hundreds of photographs that we had at our disposal.
It rained actually in 1966, so all the night footage is raining and with cars exploding, interactive light with flames and rain and patterns and textures, and it helps also photograph the speed by tracking the cars close and low, and you pick up all the spray from the tire.
Hold it together now.
The cars get filthy during a 24-hour race. So we had stages. There was like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in terms of how dirty the car and the cockpits of the car and the windshields would get. So we would break down, like, this scene where these cars are going by the Dunlop Bridge, all the cars need to be at dirt level 4. And the road is a wet down. It's not raining, but it rained in the previous scene, so the road has to be wet down. And we need direct sunlight or low sunlight. So every one of these revolutions around the track is a huge amount of teamwork between production design teams, stunt teams, car assembly and maintenance teams, props, costume, wardrobe, and obviously just the gaffer and God's light coming down. That was a huge challenge, and one that hopefully, when you watch the movie, completely vaporizes, meaning that we only get noticed when we are busted or make a mistake, so that the real beauty of it is that you actually believe you made a full revolution around a single track.
Tea's ready, Ken. Oh, thank you, Chaz. Happy birthday, old chap.
Great run.
When I got asked to do this film, I brought in Robert Nagel, who has a great racing background, so he'd translate good between the stunts and the race car drivers and the prep of it all.
Robert Nagel and Darren Prescott are doing a fantastic job on really focusing on bringing back not only the reality of this movie and the time period, but also focusing on making it as realistic as possible.
Nagel assembled a team of mostly proper professional drivers, former drivers, a couple of stunt guys mixed in there, but Our main group of guys are former race car drivers. One of them actually won Le Mans. 3 of them, dads, raced before. So we have Alex Gurney and Jeff Bucknam and Derek Hill. So we have all 3 of their sons running in the races.
We have quite a lot of actual race car drivers here that have a lot of experience, which really, really helps. And some of them actually have relatives that were alive during that time, which is quite special.
Most of what I felt like they were going to have to do wouldn't be expert line readings, but in fact look like the real thing behind a wheel.
I was the 3rd generation driver. My grandfather really kind of got everybody sort of into the business as far as racing goes.
I've been to the Le Mans circuit and raced historic cars on the Le Mans circuit, and I can tell you, being here in Savannah, Georgia, on this racetrack on Hutchinson Island, it's incredible what they can do to make it look like the actual Le Mans.
In '66, my dad was doing Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR, sports cars, Le Mans, all at the same time. So every weekend was like that for him. It was such a huge spectacle back then. He talked a lot about it, to me and the various stories over the years and what he learned each year. It was much more an endurance contest back then than it is now. If you see the pictures from the start line, you see hundreds of thousands of fans. It was really one of the world's great sporting events.
To assemble these drivers in this capacity has just been kind of a surreal sort of opportunity and moment for me. I've got to meet some new guys and the guys that I've known of but never had the opportunity to meet, and then work with some guys that I've worked with for many, many years, but it's certainly humbling.
I've done some high-level commercial work and I've been around a lot of cameras and camera cars and the arm cars, but coming onto this film, I have seen stuff that I've never seen before.
I'm so honored to take this role and to do it to the best of my ability. But, to drive a car that was iconic back in the day and to drive the replica GT40 is really special. I have a whole new appreciation for what these guys went through and how grueling it was for them to be able to drive these cars back in the day at the level they did, at the risk they did, and in the conditions they did. So a lot of respect for what they were doing back in the day.
So when we finish the race and it's Gurney and Bucknam and Ken Miles crossing the finish line, Jeff, when he saw his dad's car come from Picture Cars, he was super emotional about it. And so Nagel thought it would be a great idea to let him drive his dad's car across the finish line. So we put him in there, and he's actually driving his dad's car when the 3 of them cross the finish line, which is amazing.
When you receive all this racing footage, it might seem overwhelming because there's so many angles, so many different options, but we try to stay as close as possible to the driver's experience in the car.
Siege, come on!
We were aided by the use of previs, which we had a very, very good idea of what shots we needed to shoot and where they landed in the film.
When you first work on that scene, all you're seeing is blue screens and green screens and cranes and ropes, but you quickly forget there was blue screen there or there was a crane there. You get really wrapped up in the story.
All right, you bastard. Let's do this again.
Over the years with Jim, we've established a routine where we actually have the sound designers come on real early, and so they're designing sound and providing multi-layered content and tracks for us so that we have a really fleshed out universe. On this particular movie, it was the first time I worked with surround sound in my cutting room. So the designers were bringing 5.1 tracks into me, and I was able to listen to them and work with them in the cutting room.
Jim's very story-oriented, character-oriented, and all the sound elements that we make are designed to promote that story.
Oh my God. Oh my God!
As the dailies were coming in and the editors were assembling the picture, a lot of it was shot without sound. So my job was to go in and clean it all up and fill it out, all the sound, so that when Jim actually looked at dailies or the initial cut scenes, it was a fully formed film. Not a whole lot of guys out there who own these cars that want us to record them. I mean, you could just imagine, the conversation of me like, hey, can I take your multi-million-dollar car out on the track and rev it up to 7,000 RPMs and maybe we'll hit 200 miles an hour? How about that? We found a guy in Ohio who had built his own GT40. Now, he'd used the original GT40 parts, he'd used the GT40 specs. Ford came out and certified this car as a legitimate GT40. So he was very proud of this car, and it was as close as we could get to the real thing. We actually shot a surround sound microphone that actually has 7 microphones. So that if you actually were to use it literally from the vantage point that it recorded, it would fill the entire theater. That was just one mic. And we had 2 recorders in there. We had 4 others outside the car, but it took us a couple of days just to get the GT40. We found a Ferrari in Powder Springs, Georgia. It was a Testarossa, 1959. We couldn't record it in Georgia because it violated the sound limits that were set by the local track, so we had to take it down to Florida. Florida, you can do anything. Those 2 star cars, once we recorded them, everything was layered on top of that.
The sounds that he recorded we used when we were putting the scenes together, and they actually brought the scenes to a certain life.
Sound, the picture, the music, everything, they all conspire. They all conspire for the same goal, and we're all on this path together.
We get to enjoy close to 30 minutes of pure racing. As an audience member, I think that would be really rewarding and really exciting.
For me, making movies, I like editing them, and I like mixing them, and I like shooting them, and it's all fun. But in the end, when I'm not doing this anymore, what I'll really miss is getting there with your friends and working together. And the camaraderie, and in many ways, the team behind the scenes and the team in front of the camera, all were kind of paying tribute to that kind of camaraderie, to teamwork, to friendship, to allyship, to putting ego aside and working together, and to love.
Idea of perfection, of a perfect lap.
He's planning every move he's going to make, deciding in advance how he's going to shift, when he's going to downshift, when he's going to brake, how to handle this topography. It's almost like it's a moon landing.
You can't make every lap perfect.
But I can try.
It's about more than car racing. The movie is very much about characters who are obsessed with achievement.
I certainly feel this way about filmmaking. How do you tell the perfect story? It's not something that's perfectible, and that's the beauty of it.
For all of us, I think we found tremendous parallels in the racing world with the idea of making movies. We have to get funding. We have to convince corporations to pay for our dreams. We have to somehow keep them running enough on time and on budget that they don't send those people down in the black vans to pull the plug. And we have to make them money, as well as achieving our own idea of excellence. So for all of us, even those who don't drive race cars, there was a tremendous connection.
Apologies for the unannounced intrusion, Mr. Shelby, but when a man pays $9 million for an automobile, he ought to at least be able to see it.
Here we go. People have been trying to make a movie about this series of events in the 60s leading up to the 66 race, I think, for a long time.
This was a real turning point in the history of racing. You know, this is the first time an American team won, and it stopped the dominance of Ferrari.
The idea somehow of that Southern California culture juxtaposing against kind of the pristine European tradition of racing and the American kind of corporate influence was what I was always attracted to, and I thought would produce so much friction and fun in the movie.
Where are you guys? You guys should have been down there.
I first read the script a number of years back, and then it came back with Jim, and we've got history. We made 310 to Yuma together, and it just all felt right, you know? It was fascinating to learn all about it, and I'm amazed at how many people do know this story.
When I heard it was Jim and then potentially Christian, like we kind of came into it at around the same time. It was a very easy choice for me to sign on to this one.
Dave, line up a start mark for these guys.
What always struck me about the story was that not only did it feature such unique characters, but nothing comes out exactly as you might predict. I'd always wanted to make a sports film, but one of your challenges making one is obviously everyone's going to expect when they watch it that the underdog or whatever characters you're following are going to win the race, and that it's going to be that simple.
The thing with Jim is that the characters are really his joy, completely. He really is like a kid in a candy store with film.
That's the simple solution that also makes what we've already shot good.
Jim's been directing for so long that on the fly, he's aware of shots that he's going to need, and he's really good at talking to actors.
Take you bet I am up there. It'll be a nice single of that.
That's what I'm going to do.
Anybody who's worked with Jim, he's very hands-on. He gets right in there with the scene with you.
Fuck yeah, you bet I am.
I think he's a guy who's enormously grateful to be where he is.
You bet I am.
And that's exactly how I feel. I'm enormously grateful to be a part of this cast and to be a part of this film.
Well, I got to hand it to you, Lee. You came through. What do you think we've been doing for 70 years? Put engines in cars, we make them go.
Jim has a way of seeing a take and having a visceral reaction to it and coming to you and discussing about what that reaction is and how about let's try something different.
Everything from the way that it's shot, the lenses that they use when you see the shots, so, you know, you'll take a little sneak and it looks so beautiful. Every single little detail is just so perfect.
Jim is on fire right now as a creative filmmaker. He is a very active director, which I truly appreciate. And he does it with this sort of joyful gusto, I would say, and this great sense of a flair of the dramatic, all while being really fun to work with.
Mr. Ford, gentlemen,
Shelby.
As soon as James came in, he really pressed everybody to really get under the skin of these characters and understand what made these guys do what they wanted to do. You know, I think he brought a real tenderness to these guys who could easily be seen as just mechanics or, you know, gearheads or just race car drivers. I mean, he really brought a sort of deeper complexity to these characters, and I think it shows in the movie.
He's always, you know, coming up to you, talking to you, asking you what you feel, you know, talking about the scene. And he's really encouraging and helpful when it comes to if you're kind of confused with something that happens.
There's always moments where you find things. One of the touches in the movie that just came out of us playing, after Ken Miles wins the first race at Willow Springs, and Noah is standing on the wall cheering his father, one of the first takes we did, Christian drove up and we had a line exchange as he drove by his son, and he said to me, "Why wouldn't I just ask him to get in with me?" And I said, "Why not? Let's try it."
That calls for a nice cup of tea.
I'll put the kettle on!
Up in!
And when they get in the car, Christian had the idea to sing this song from his childhood in England, I'm H-A-P-P-Y, I'm H-A-P-P-Y, which of course Noah knows because he's also English, and it was such a beautiful moment.
H-A-P-P-Y, I'm H-A-P-P-Y. I know I am, I'm sure I am, I'm H-A-P-P-Y.
It was just an exciting movie to make, to get up and go make every day. So if the movie is half of what the experience of shooting it was and for what my hopes and expectations were, then we're going to be in good shape.
The cars are beautiful, and the risk that these men bore feeds your imagination. But if you don't find the right story to tell and don't find real characters your audience believes, you're going to end up with nothing but just a lot of beautiful car bodies getting sexy hits of light, and you're never going to have a story.
Looks fast, doesn't it?
Looks aren't everything.
Roll, please. Roll. Hey, Kevin Mark.
Do you like losing, Ken?
Excuse me.
Oh, you heard me.
I do not lose.
Without sponsors, Ken, you get no car. And last I checked, the professionals all have a car. You cannot win the SCCA without one. If you're not winning, you are losing.
Don't make me lamp this at your head.
Did you bring your son all the way out here to watch you get disqualified, or just act like a jackass? Well, that answers that.
For me, what was always drawing me, the story of Shelby and Miles, were the unique group of characters, all of whom were so opposite.
Look at these guys, Sean.
Ken Miles was just a very strong-minded individual, incredibly passionate about what he did, incredibly sure of himself, willing to go down in flames for his own beliefs.
His passion was that he was 100% focused on it. For example, he would walk along the grid and look at the other guys that were his competition, and he'd stand in front of the car and just stare at them. The idea was he was trying to psych them out, and he'd look at these guys until they'd look away. And then he knew he had them.
Get me out of here, Pop! Come on! All right.
He was irascible and not afraid to speak his mind and not one to just fall into step with everybody else.
Learn to drive, you pillock!
He's a very English man. He's from the Midlands. He's from a place called Sutton Coldfield. He was a military man. He served in a tank unit. He was there in, like, I think it was D-Day +2 or 3.
He was a tank engineer, repairing and driving tanks, even as part of the final invasion in France.
I'm never gonna get the good rides. I started too late.
Because you fought in the bloody war.
He's really difficult. He has a very hard time suffering fools.
Are you telling me I don't know how to drive my own car?
No. But if you ask me, this isn't your car. Your car's more Plymouth Studebaker.
Screw you, you limey prick.
First and foremost, I think that everybody viewed him as a mechanic. He was somebody who always enjoyed taking things apart, seeing how they work, putting them back together.
New transmission, axles, sparks all around. Lose the body and the tires, and you got yourself a contender. Anything on this beauty that does work?
The mirrors, outstanding.
Miles had never risen quite to the levels that he could rise because his personality got in the way.
Don't get me wrong, Lenny.
Leo.
My advice is lose the inline 6, that idiotic 3-speed, shorten the wheelbase, somehow lose half a ton, and lower the price.
Dad.
Nice suit.
Ken was always after trying to be so perfect that he matched the perfection of the vehicle itself and fulfilled the potential of the track. There must be a limit at this track, and he wanted to find the limit.
This car wants to go faster. I feel it.
Meaning, if these things are real and hard and math and physics relate to them, then I'm the only unpredictable element in relation to all these knowns. The road, the weather, the air, the car, its capabilities, its brakes.
Oh, yes! More of that, please. More of that, my girl.
Once he got in a race car, whether it was testing or racing, it was all business. There was no fiddling around, no joking, it's just strictly, we're gonna focus on what we're doing here, and until I get out of the car, that's it.
Shelby really saw his talents as a racer, and he was a real purist when it came to that. He didn't compromise in the slightest, and that was both his saving grace and his Achilles heel as well.
You're gonna wanna see this. Trust me.
There's an awful lot of respect between Carol and Ken. You know, these are two men who recognize in each other this excellence in this particular sport.
I think Shelby saw Ken as a driver that might even be better than him. If he can't get behind the wheel, then he's going to help protect him so that at least he can kind of, by extension, live through Ken's experiences.
The best driver didn't always get the ride. You needed a driver who could also be diplomatic and who could get in front of the cameras and who wasn't going to say something impolitic at the wrong time. And as a result, Miles' career wasn't where it could have been.
You know, Lee here asked me a while back, what's the one thing money can't buy? I'll tell you what it is. A pure racer behind the wheel of your car. That's Ken Miles.
Well, be that as it may, we think he may be too pure.
Throughout his life, he'd shot himself in the foot many times because of his desire to never lose any battle. But through winning battles, Ken Miles often lost the war.
I haven't been able to get you to follow an order since day one. Whatever you want to do is fine with me.
My choice.
Your choice.
Ken Miles, who's unbendable and won't compromise and always seeking perfection, at the climax of the film has to actually bend and compromise. While it was a tragedy that he gave up that race, as a victory for himself anyway, it was a kind of personal victory in the sense that Ken never cooperated. In many ways, it was in the last laps of this race that he truly exceeded himself. He exceeded his own force of personality and kind of transcended his own drive to win at all costs, to slow down for the betterment of Shelby, who I'm sure was under pressure from Ford to get him to slow down and to kind of do what the team needed.
Well, I find there's a great liberation in playing, a real person. There are eccentricities and mannerisms that if you were just inventing them for yourself, you might seem like you're just being an egotistical actor. But when there are real people, you go, my God, they really did that. They really had that attitude. There it is, plain and bold. It's the truth. Well, you promised me the drive. Not the win.
I thought there's a lot of Ken in Christian. Christian's most widely known to audiences as the Batman, obviously, or Dick Cheney, darker characters, gruff characters, very often not British characters. And I think one of the revelations of the film is we get to see so much of himself as a working class kid from England, as a guy who loves motorsports, as a kind of passionate perfectionist, as a family man. All those aspects of his personal character fuse with Ken, and I think give him a chance to give audiences a taste of a really honest piece of himself.
From the moment you're on set with him, he is the person that he's playing. You're aware when you're looking at him that he's completely in it. And that means in it, in the physicality and in the voice, and that's the way that he's found works the best for him.
Oh, look at you! Oh, no, man. That's pretty good for a Mets fan.
Just physically, he had put on 70 pounds to play Dick Cheney, and when I signed up to do it, Jim said, oh, man, he's really worried because he's got to lose all this weight, and race car drivers tend to, they want to be as light as they can. And Ken was had a very particular look. And I showed up and I saw him on the first day, and he was 170. So that's a 70-pound swing, and that takes an extraordinary amount of discipline. It was what he was doing and what he needed to do to play the role and to play it to the best of his ability.
You want some ice cream?
Yeah.
All right. Come on in.
Christian Bale is one of the nicest people I've ever met. He'll say hi to you, he'll joke around with you. He's always playing pranks and being really funny, but also he's really focused and really always in the zone, always ready to go as soon as it says action.
It's such a gift to be in a scene with an actor of that quality. Your game is raised every time you step into a scene together because he's just so present and he has such an understanding of who his character is, and it's been really, it's been quite an incredible experience.
Wait a second. What type of girl are you?
Type of girl who likes the smell of wet gasoline.
Oh.
Burnt rubber.
Oh, are you some kind of a deviant? Yeah.
Well, only since I married you.
He has really done his research on Ken Miles. I mean, you ask him anything and he will know about it. And I think that really is great when it comes to knowing what Ken would do in this situation or something. How's it feeling?
Well, get in there. I met with Peter Miles, with Ken Miles' son, and get all of his insight as well was a real honor.
When I first met Christian, I found it interesting because he came in not as, here I am, I'm Christian Bale, but just an ordinary guy, the nicest guy on the planet, just dressed ordinary like you'd see somebody walking down the street. And he wanted to know as much as he could about my father accurately. So I provided him with photographs, articles, books, and even a voice recording so that he could try and portray the part as well as he could.
We saw the real deal. We just looked at Ken. He was actually very ahead of his time in terms of fitness and whatnot. He had been a smoker and all that, but he gave it all up. He moved to California. He was a runner. He was someone who was really into health. And we took exactly from the documentation that we saw of him.
Christian Bale wears a race suit a lot and coveralls. So it was just finding the right tone for him to still make him look good, but like the character, who might be more sloppy. And so we sort of did the fine line between making him feel like Ken Miles and also servicing the script.
He went to driving school, so he had all the shifting and steering and turning down. He was not only acting, but mimicking facial expressions of Ken Miles.
Okay. I went and I trained with Bob Bondurant, who race fans will know exactly who he is, which was an incredible time. Just the thrill of taking a car to its limit, in my very inexperienced way. But that was an absolute joy, and the thrill of that is amazing. And you don't have to be that great to push to your own limits. You understand what these true gods of racing must have felt like. And that's been so enjoyable for me.
Hey, Bulldog. You're on the wrong side of the line.
Oh, man. I've got to do more of these film things.
I have found on movies that, you know, everything trickles from the top. And so when you have two people who bring it, who are happy to be patient, who wait on set, who want to figure out the scene, how to get it right, who aren't anxious to go back to their trailer or home, who want to figure it out, who everything, like their characters, what matters most is the excellence of the work.
So you're gonna build a car
To beat old man Ferrari with Ford, with a Ford.
Correct.
And how long did you tell them that you needed? 200, 300 years?
90 days.
My name is Carroll Shelby. I build race cars.
Carroll Shelby is kind of a salesman and a hustler, and he's kind of compensating for the fact he could no longer race himself.
Guy wins the 24-hour Le Mans, suddenly retires, starts selling cars. It just don't make sense.
He was a master of that kind of diplomacy. He knew how to sell anything to anyone and kind of manage a bunch of competing agendas and relationships in order to get what he wanted.
Shelby, you're up bright and early. Well, early bird gets the worm, Pops.
One of the advantages of this project having taken 10 years to come to fruition was that at the very beginning of it, we got to meet Carroll Shelby.
I had an instructor tell me,
Don, I would say it's probably a good time to buckle up.
do everybody a favor, stay on the ground. That's a true story.
And that was a massive advantage to us because if you've met the person that you're writing about and there's something about their spirit that you witnessed, you don't forget it.
Shelby was a very funny person.
Tell you what, that's like riding a bike.
A very knowledgeable person and a very serious person, but he would give you his time when you wanted to talk to him. It wasn't like, you know, talking around you and over you, this kind of thing.
How y'all doing?
Talk about making an entrance.
I'll hold that thought. Hey, Peter, how you doing?
He has a kind of incredible Type A personality, and he's an obsessive race car driver who suddenly can't do the thing he loves anymore. And he's kind of set himself up with a business where he's almost compensated for the lack of the excitement of the track by trying to get that same high being an entrepreneur.
Shelby brings the experience of a man who's reached the mountaintop. He's the only American to have ever won a Le Mans. Shelby has a wisdom on the starting grid for this amazing opportunity.
Fill the tank. Shelby, you just... Am I on fire? Am I on goddamn fire? No, you're not on fire. Fill the tank. Fill the tank.
He was really on the cusp of kind of fading into oblivion and just being another guy hustling, trying to sell cars to people. And this was an unbelievable opportunity for him to pivot into becoming a world-class car maker, becoming like the preeminent designer. Obviously, we know he's succeeded because we know about the Shelby Mustang and we know about his name today.
Carroll Shelby. Maybe. Lee Iacocca, Ford Motor.
Everything that has to do with Shelby. Even today, you can go buy that Super Snake, and it's Shelby all over that car. And they're building these Cobras, and they're building kit Cobras as well as restoring the original Cobras.
I feel a tremendous responsibility when it's a real person. There's a ton of documentaries that have been made and a ton of existing interviews. And it's really helpful because his voice was very distinct. I spent a lot of time on that.
Wake up, Lee. It's your partner calling from those fancy new offices you bought me.
I listen to him a lot. You just try to make it so it's second nature.
We wanted him to feel like Carroll Shelby. And originally we could have had some of the more over-the-top clothes, but he doesn't need the costume to define the character so much and be so exaggerated. So he wears his cowboy hat, which, you know, Carroll Shelby wore a lot, and his crocodile cowboy boots.
These guys, they're drivers. They're always on a racetrack. So Jim always wanted them to look kind of sunburned, weathered, They're always greasy, they're always working in the engines.
There's a lot of stuff post-building the GT40 that he did reflecting on it, and I found that very helpful too, because it was an older man looking back in retrospect and talking about some of these relationships and some of these times. Charlie was the one we spent the most time with in pre-production, and he was on set as well.
I'm Charles Agape. I was a crew chief and chief mechanic at Carroll Shelby American. Prior to that, I was with Ken Miles as like his own personal race mechanic on much lesser cars. And mostly when I was talking to Matt and Christian, they wanted to know more about Ken Miles, his activities, how he acted, what he was doing. And the same with Matt Silver's Carroll Shelby.
We're gonna eat those vets for breakfast. We're lighter, we're faster, and that don't work, we're nastier.
Matt has such a great understanding of cameras, the lenses. Like, he was talking with Jim all the time about, well, you're gonna cut out of this shot at this point, you're gonna edit it this way. Totally different approach to me, how I do it. And I think he's gonna make a really good director at some point.
Yeah, not to make it too technical, but no.
I got it. No, I got it.
I think Matt was a natural at kind of that almost musicality of Carroll Shelby that he kind of mesmerizes.
Give me one reason why I don't fire everyone associated with this abomination, starting with you.
Matt and I worked a long time on the scenes where he kind of holds forth or tells a story, and you almost fall into the spell of his words.
Hell, right now, we don't even know if our paint job will last the whole 24 hours. But our last lap clocked 218 miles an hour down the Mulsanne Straight. Now, in all his years of racing, old Enzo ain't never seen anything move that fast. We're faster than he is.
Because in many ways, his character, it's both his strength and his liability, is that he can talk his way out of almost anything. And when someone can talk their way out of almost anything, it means they've lived an almost unaccountable life. So in some ways, the movie is very much about Shelby also having to kind of own pain or own loss or feel it and maybe not have a way to dance out of it.
Go ahead, Carroll. Go to war.
Thank you, sir.
So I was watching a monologue where Matt Damon is explaining who he is and what he's about and how lucky some people are to get to do what they love. And I was watching him do it multiple takes, and it was riveting.
He's equal parts a brilliant artist and such a kind and genuine and awesome human being, and he's unbelievably committed and at the same time completely sort of available to be a sounding board and to help carve this thing out.
I always say it's like tennis, where you want to play against somebody who's as good or better than you because they're hitting the ball correctly. And I would say that Matt Damon and Christian Bale are as good at tennis players as you get in the whole world.
Ken, I'm sorry. Sincerely.
Actually, our approach to acting is very similar to, the difference between our characters, between Shelby and Miles. Shelby, who is very strategic and much more understanding of the bigger picture, and who is also a bloody great driver, as Matt is an incredible actor, really nuanced and subtle and everything, and then versus Miles and me, who are just sort of, just doing whatever we do.
Do you have any idea the kind of shit that I had to eat just to get four wheels on that grid? No, you don't, because you don't deal with any of that stuff. Now knock it off, Ken. We got work to do, and this car ain't gonna build itself.
There's a scene in the middle of this movie where Carroll Shelby and Ken
I'm in excited about making the picture and tremendous respect for each other.
I'll go to hell.
GT40 was, in the American tradition, a kind of muscle car, but didn't have the finesse. It was a vehicle that was built entirely to go, but not to stop.
They're these amazing machines that take a great amount of delicacy to be able to drive them to their limit without going too far.
Giddy up! Giddy up!
What's the lap record here, Bert?
158.
150 dead.
How fast were you, mate?
They were like rocket ships, you know, with the fuel tanks in the door. I mean, like they were just surrounded in gas with this massive engine underneath.
When you look at the GT40 and you look at the Cobra, it's like looking at a biplane and a jet plane. The whole look, it was like the arrival of modernity.
Not bad. Not bad at all. Mwah.
I'm a Ferrari guy. But the Ford GT was most powerful car at that time.
In a straight drag race, the GT40 would have beat the Ferrari hands down any time, but their challenges were different. The Ferrari was a beautifully handling car, which could accelerate and decelerate with perfection. Although it just didn't have the juice, it didn't have the power of the GT40.
You can mash the accelerator all the way down, but the brakes were like the weakest part of these cars.
Oh, shit!
The challenge of the car was never, can it go fast enough? They put as much engine as they could possibly pack into that size car. More engine than, in a sense, anyone else had. The challenge of the vehicle was how to stop it, how to slow it down.
He's got brake fade.
In those days, they were flying down that Mulsanne Straight at 230 miles an hour. 230 miles an hour in the 60s when they weren't really sure if they were going to be able to stop at the end of that. You know, what type of man is willing to do that?
He's going to break his own record.
Shut up. It's really a beautiful car even today. I mean, if you look at the cars that they made in the 64, 65, 66, they don't feel like anachronisms. They feel timeless. And so it's fun, you know, to watch them go really fast.
The whole thing suddenly has this much more savage, intense, driven look to it. There's no jalopy, there's no sweetness, cute little windshield or curved little cubby to sit in. This thing is like a living bullet with tires. So it was no longer just kind of an interesting shape, but what shape is going to cut through the air? And the advent of engineering and aerodynamics were starting to make a play in how these cars were built.
Over 90, air's getting in, not getting out. It's the nose. I can feel it in the wheel.
GT40 comes from GT being Grand Touring, and it's 40 inches off the ground.
40?
Yep.
This is the prototype car that Carroll Shelby brought over from England, Slough, England. It was designed over there. He didn't like what they were doing, so he went against the rules and shipped it over to America to have it worked on here by his guys.
You may not like it, but this is how things are done at Ford.
Well, not anymore.
This is the first light body race car that Ford produced. It's a fiberglass body. It's very light, and that's why they had the lift problems at first. It started with a 289 engine, and they ended up paring down a 427 engine that they didn't think would ever fit in the car.
She's outputting max horsepower from this displacement.
So put in a bigger engine.
Where are we going to put it, on the roof?
They took a bunch of parts on them, remanufactured them to be smaller and lighter, and they put that big engine in there, and that made the difference.
Driving it is deceivingly fast. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. It accelerates, it turns, it brakes, it does everything really well. Not like a contemporary race car, but for that era, it was amazing.
They are sensitive beasts, you know. It's actually like Ken Miles would say. He would say it's a ballet, it's not a wrestling match. And that's very much how you actually work your feet as well. You kind of point your toes in this very delicate fashion, but then you really can feel the car, you know, underneath you, and you get a sense of what the car is doing.
We researched everything that Carroll Shelby put together for his GT40s, and we knew we were going to get some replicas that were what the original cars looked like.
There's 9 total GT40s that we'll have in the movie. We have 2 cars that were made by Superformance, and the rest of them we just got chassis made by a vendor, and the bodies were made by a vendor, and then everything was built in our shop. They play several different race cars at Le Mans, and then they'll get a new coat of paint, new graphics, and at Daytona the same cars will play different cars there. We are definitely spending a lot of time making sure that these things look as authentic as they possibly can.
It's not until just a week ago that I got to see the GT40 in person, and I've been obsessed with that for the past few months. It's just great to see how they move, and you just get the sense of how fast they're going when they're racing.
Ford put a lot of time and engineering into that car, and it was an arduous task for them, but ultimately they came up with a product that was a world-class car and was faster than anything else out there.
Go, 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 go!
You ready?
The name on the middle of that steering wheel should tell you that I was born ready, Shelby. Hit it.
Attaboy.
Whoa, that's got a little kick, doesn't it? Whoa.
It's about right now the uninitiated have a tendency to soil themselves.
Yeah, baby! Yeah, baby! Oh, my God! Whoa!
You okay? It's Ford. You all right?
I had no idea.
It was really an education because Jim and I aren't really like race car people, so we had to sort of become experts. And there are so many different race cars that are characters in the movie that had to be just right.
I love cars, I love car design, but I'm not one of those guys. Like, I'm not the obsessive, and I think in many ways it helped me to not get lost in the fetishization of the cars and kind of really find the characters.
When I hit the gas, let's get rid of the vacuum secondaries.
Charlie, get a Harley carb, we're going to rebuild the throttle assembly.
There was a gigantic effort in recreating the detail and the richness and the character of these automobiles. Each one of these automobiles is a different character.
The team that was assembling our cast of cars did tremendous research with our production designer, all of whom were tracing the reality of the car's development, so huge amounts of research had to happen.
We have 7 Corvettes ranging from 1956 to 1963. We have 3 replica Porsche Speedsters in the race that were built by a local company, JPS Motorsports.
I'm gonna outbrake you on the next turn!
We're running these cars hard, and there is breakdowns, and we don't have time to fix them, so they need to bring in the same car right away.
These are the slab side Cobras, which are the very first AC Cobra that Shelby modified. They're kit cars as well from a company called Superformance in Irvine. The actual Carroll Shelby car just sold for $3 million.
The open helmet and open cockpit, it's an amazing time period to capture because it's just so raw. And they were just out there sometimes with seatbelts. Some of them didn't wear seatbelts at all, and just getting out there and racing door handle to door handle in that time period. It's been amazing to capture.
If anything was vital for me, it was that you felt that these characters were always one blink of an eye away from death. That these things were hulking beasts, these cars. The shells were made of aluminum or fiberglass or some combination. I think it very often felt for them like you were riding at 200 miles an hour in a cardboard box. There was no real protection.
It was the birth of auto racing, but it was also the birth of the Cobra automobile because you had Porsches and you had Corvettes and you had Cobras all coming together. It was really the strong were going to survive.
What are they doing?
Making your car go faster.
The GT40 may be the stuff of legend. Ferrari and Henry Ford and Shelby and the Cobra, all these vehicles may be the stuff of legend, but that we had to make them feel used, lived in, that these were sometimes pieces of crap that they were frustrated with and wanted to kick, that their relationship with these vehicles was one where they were more disposable.
The bloody door won't close! All right, all right. Maybe it's the hinge.
I was stunned, actually, when I first showed up and saw the cars. I didn't know how authentic they were going to look, and they really look good. And they do a lot of special things like getting the dust just right to see all the attention to detail. It's pretty fun.
There is a graphic layout for each car. Graphic designer, LA-based Jason Perrine, he put these together with the reference and the direction that I provided. This is a Rosso Corsa, which is the official Ferrari color. What you see on here is not a Ferrari red rivet, but it's actually a guide dot. We use them as rivets for the exterior bodywork of the Ferraris. The tires that are a common tire for our GT40s and the Ferraris. The GT40s ran with Goodyears. The 330 P3s, the Ferraris ran with Firestones. We weren't going to get original those or even a company to make those. So we came up with a vinyl stencil solution that we could tack onto the sidewall and paint in different ways, and that was our reliable and faithful to the period substitute.
A lot of the research we did was not only charting the way the cars changed over the years, both in body and engine, and obviously body paint and all that, but also how they drove them and how they related to them.
You know how we talked about how you do your thing, I do my thing? This is my thing. Just trust me, Ken.
There's only so many ways you can shoot cars. Are you going to pan like this? Are you going to travel along like this? And I was like, we're not going to do any of those. My thing was like, let's get in the cars.
We definitely wanted to make the audience feel what it's like to be in these little death traps and these little insane machines that, basically they took a lightweight chassis and put the biggest engine they could possibly put into it.
We've spent a lot of time developing this vehicle over here, which is our elevator rig, and it captures the high-speed filming, and it's connected to the car, so it moves really well through the traffic. And then we have our edge crane, which is a storytelling vehicle that captures more of the scope of the story.
There's no way you can create or fake somebody going through the G-forces of pulling a car around these tracks, the 2Gs or 3Gs, and feeling the vibration on their faces and the helmets and the interactive lights and kicks off the chrome. I mean, you can do a lot of things on stage, but there's nothing like that.
With Christian in the car, we're doing probably about 120 with those kind of scenes. That's a good safe speed for that piece of equipment. The jolting and the cornering and all that kind of stuff really helps him have it be more real than just him sitting in a car on stage.
All right, you bastard. Let's do this again. Oh man, that is addictive. That is absolutely glorious, and they can just stick going around corners, and it's like you can turn on a dime. It's just amazing what you can do. That's my girl, that's my girl!
For Faden and I, we're running our own race team. We have all our gear, our cameras, our cranes, our camera cars, all the rigging. And in many ways, the movie is the technology you see on the front of the lens, and then there's a tremendous amount of assembled technology behind the camera.
We went through a lot of testing and didn't overcomplicate things with, fancy slider moves and all that. It was like, let's hard mount these cameras onto these bodies and embrace the vibration even without vibration isolators.
This new head behind me, it's a remote gimbal, but it's only 19 pounds. So that allows us to move the camera much more faster, regardless of what kind of G-force or what kind of curves you take with the camera.
I think the way it's going to feel like a movie is if the coverage of the race feels like nothing you ever saw, that you're much more with the driver, breathing with the driver, feeling the road, feeling every decision they're making with the gear shift, with the steering wheel, feeling the weather pressing against you and all the other oppositional forces against their vehicle and their success.
Can you keep this up?
Can the car?
We came up with this rig, the Biscuit rig. It's quick, so we're carrying the car and powering it with this vehicle and being more in the race. This has a 440 cubic inch Chevy LS motor. We're carrying this Cobra, engine and all. When we go to the GT40 and the Ferraris, they're actual bucks, no engine, no tranny. So the rear tires of the GT40 will actually be turning. It'll be the rear axle of the Biscuit rig.
The pod car and the Biscuit rig kind of go hand in hand. The pod is mounted at the back, and the front half of the car is real. And so all the shots from over the shoulder or looking in the side are done from the pod. They're both carrying actors, and getting the shot of Christian in the car while he's racing. It's just one's a forward shot and one's reversed. I'm also driving a rig called Frankenstein, which is a race car that's had tubing put all the way around it, so it's protected, and do a lot of the high-speed shooting with that.
What was most important to us was, in an age when everything feels possible because of computer graphics and visual effects, we wanted the high of being on the road, and not a movie digital simulation of it, but the reality of it.
Ken Miles has set a new lap record.
When you're trying to make a world come to life on screen, whether it's a fictional world or one that existed, you need what I call the specificity of reality.
The script by the Butterworths was so well written and so interesting for me as a designer, because it was set in the 1960s, and it also spanned quite a few years from 1962 all the way to 1966. Plus the fact that the locations were spread around the world, really. We had the good fortune to shoot in Le Mans, France, which was really a thrill. They were in Maranello, Italy, all around Southern California, in Florida, Daytona, and in Michigan as well.
Expect to see some great driving from Phil.
What happened to your shield?
11. And Dan
New design!
When movies fail to make a world come alive, it's very often because the actors, the characters, the extras, the world doesn't seem dirty, it doesn't seem lived in. No one seems to know what to do with these tools or how to use them. It isn't just the look, it's actually the way the actors are all relating with these vehicles or in anything.
Is that the auxiliary top?
Yeah, exactly. It's an option. Yeah. I took it.
All of these different locations are part of the mythology of race car driving that the huge segment of the world is very, very familiar with. So we had to do that justice.
What I like about the different races in our movie is each race is a very distinct character. Willow Springs is really about the grassroots effort and this groundswell of enthusiasm for car racing in the early 1960s. And it has a very sort of relaxed look.
Everyone involved went out to Willow Springs and raced and saw the cars and got the feeling of the cars and talked to the drivers.
We are at Willow Springs in Roseman, California, which was the first purposely built road course in the entire United States. It's a 2.5-mile road course as opposed to an oval, which you're only going in one direction. At this track, you have to go in both directions. We're trying to be period correct and recapture the days that they were here in 1963 racing on this track. And the drivers of that period are here in spirit as well as through the racing.
Cool, blimey.
Still racing? We are still racing. Let's go. Let's go, guys. Come on.
We shot Daytona at Fontana Speedway in Southern California. And the trick with that is just all you had to do is make it feel like Florida. And California and Florida aren't that far off from one another.
This is really a unique location because it's the only oval-shaped auto speedway in California, and it's a pretty good representation of Daytona. Daytona is about 20% larger, and the banks are a little bit steeper, but it gave us this sort of canvas for all of the car racing and the circuit and the pits that we are going to extend in the computer and make it look like we're in Florida in 1966.
Daytona is much more new construction, kind of modernist looking, a clear oval with a center track to create opposite turns that they drive through.
What happened in the 1966 race is the cars would actually cut through the center track. So instead of NASCAR, which goes around in a circle, the 24 hours of Daytona would create more of a zigzaggy course to put more stress on the automobile. And we were able to recreate that shape pretty accurately using the inner course here in Fontana and the outer course. And we worked very, very closely with the visual effects department to give the illusion that we're actually in Florida. We've recreated the River Rouge factory complex in 1963, which was the biggest car factory in the world at the time. Henry Ford actually invented the assembly line famously, And this was his first assembly line. And he controlled the entire line from the raw materials all the way to the finished cars. So we're actually recreating a section of this. We've got 3 working lines from the very unfinished Fords on one line to almost finished cherry condition cars on the 3rd line. And we're able to scour the country for these automobiles. We have 20 cars here. They're all real cars. There's no fiberglass. They're all out of real metal. They're the real thing, totally restored.
65 years and 47 million automobiles later, what shall be his legacy? Getting it in the tailpipe from a Chevy Impala.
You're honored, sir, to be invited to this illustrious place.
Grazie.
We're currently at the Edison substation, and we've turned this facility into the Ferrari racing department. Behind me, we've filled this space with a combination of picture cars and real Ferraris, with a total value of about $65 million. Some of the Ferraris behind me are actually priceless. One of them won Le Mans in 1961, and we were very fortunate to be able to find some local collectors who were willing to loan their cars for half a day here. And then half of the cars we actually manufactured in Los Angeles and in Michigan, and then brought here and fitted out as replicas for what would be here in 1963.
Oh, excuse me. Would you not do that?
Sorry, sir.
We're at Fox Airfield in Lancaster, California, and we've taken over the terminal building here that we're turning into a Ford Global launch event for the brand new Ford Mustang, which had its debut at the 1964 World's Fair in April 1964. This scene is really fun because it kind of captures the spirit of innovation that happened in the 1960s. When the Mustang came out, that was an incredible moment, and it garnered so much attention.
There's a scene on the runway out there, and we did it when the sun was setting. So it was beautiful because there were planes flying over our head, and it was just, the setting was amazing.
Over to my left is a Beech 19. It's a really well-maintained example of a private aircraft that would exist at the time, and it's a beautiful aluminum plane that Carroll Shelby takes the controls of as he makes a sort of a grand entrance here at the event. It's a beautiful, beautiful plane, a beautiful example of sort of post-mid-century streamlined modern plane.
So, yeah, 289 cubic inch V8, far out. Extensive rework of ACAC's front end and a stronger rear diff to handle the torque. Now she'd handle a quarter mile. Well, now, I'm not saying you should go drag racing. If you did, 13.6 seconds.
This is a recreation of the original 1964 Shelby Venice office. We found this incredible building in South Los Angeles that was a pretty good analog for the actual building that still exists in Venice, but it's surrounded by 4-story condos in every direction. This is about a 2,500 square foot interior with a feeling of adjacent businesses. We built a surfboard company across the street, which is a recreation of an actual surf shop in the 60s that was there at the birth of sort of the surfing culture in Venice in the 1960s. We recreated that little cafe and kind of a feeling of the neighborhood.
We saw that same car 3 times this week. Tuesday, Jeff Blitzer, Thursday, Frank Collins. Better hope they all don't show up at the same time. What's wrong with the water pump?
And Mark?
You could see when you'd arrive on set how much work had gone in to recreate this stuff exactly as it was. And it's fun when you get a chance to do a period thing like this where you're getting to tell a story on this scale.
I've been very lucky in that I've gotten to work on some of the most impressive sets in the movie. The Le Mans set, the Ford factory, Ford offices, and Shelby's hangar out at what's supposed to be LAX. All of them just spectacular locations. They make an actor's job much easier.
The set design has just been so amazing. We did a walkthrough very early on of Ken's garage before anything had been done to it, and it was just empty boxes, and then you come back 5 days later, and it was just incredible what they've done.
Another satisfied customer.
It's a great period, you know, to be photographing and capturing. Not necessarily only relating to cars, but just the props and the helmets and the watches and the gloves and fashion.
What Faden has always represented to me, no matter what project we're working on and its different demands, is he's always interested in beauty or composition, but not at the expense of reality. That our first goal always is to make sure that things don't get so pretty or so composed that you start to feel like you're looking at a window at a department store. You're not looking at the pulsing, vital reality of the film.
We got into testing cameras and lenses for this, which was fun because I'm very much into period glass. We did a bunch of tests and determined that for this picture, anamorphic lenses are really the way to go. I like the classic anamorphic distortion, how it really makes the cars look sexy. And so we settled on period glass from Panavision C-Series.
Yeah, man, you go and you can swing. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to swing. Okay.
My background is actually a graphic designer, so the graphics and the signage on this movie was really, really important to me.
We found archival images from the Western Automobile Club in France. They were good enough to send us images, but we also scoured the internet for absolutely every image we could possibly find. And it was sort of like a big puzzle where you would go through and painstakingly copy the details in each of the photographs.
We had so many signs in this movie. We had over 2 miles of banners that we created just for the Le Mans race that we recreated in Georgia. And we had hundreds and hundreds of signs made, all the graphics for the cars, all of the hard signage and the period signage. It's really a dream come true for a designer when you get to take the audience into a journey to show them a part of America and the world that doesn't exist anymore.
We're an hour of 6 at the Daytona 24, and Fords are dominating the leaderboard.
I knew from the very beginning this film needed a serious sound job because I started in the stage where they were actually doing previs for the movie that Jim actually got to direct and create the scene before he actually shot it. And part of his process is to get a full sound pass on everything like that.
Hey there, Walt. Good to see you.
Yeah, after I get out of this pit, Shelby, it's the last time you will.
Oh, don't worry. We got rear view mirrors.
So in the previs version, I did a full sound with cars and crowd and dialogue and the whole thing so that the animation looked like a feature film.
I was brought on in pre-production, so I was cutting the previs with previs artists before we even got started with production. So I was able to help to work out any logistical issues or logic problems and had a good lay of the land before the footage came in.
We were really lucky because the tone wasn't hard to find. The subjectivity and the point of view of the character in the car really sort of grounds you in your choices.
When you record a car, especially a high-performance car, there's probably 15 to 20 microphones that are set about the car, the exhaust, in the cabin, on the engine block, any place you can think that might generate sound. You may want to hear one element and not the others, and then you won't know until you match it to the picture that you're shooting it for. Then you've got the microphones outside that have the passing bys of the car, the stopping, the starting, the doors, the ignition. I mean, you've got everything.
Look, how long have we known each other? In all that time, I ever break a promise to you? Ken, I will put you in the driving seat on the grid at Le Mans next year, even if it kills me.
I hope the film, beyond the splendor of the period and the period racing and the beauty of the cars, I hope what you really get from it is a yearning to have friends like that, or to cherish the ones you have that are like that. Because for me, the movie is all about these connections between these guys.
This is a zoom. And then I tap on this. Yes. Yes, just try it.
All of them in an effort to do the best they can to achieve something that has been unachieved.
Well, you and the old camera works.
It does transcend being a racing movie. The races are phenomenal. They are so bloody exciting, but it is more than a racing movie. This is a bunch of dreamers, but they persist and they never give up. And that's the beauty of it.
The story is so relatable just from a human standpoint, I think, about this friendship and about these guys who really cared about the same thing and as a result cared about each other despite being very, very different.
Matt and Christian just walk toward him, go away and come toward him. It's a film about friendship, about brotherhood, and about the people that change us, you know, that our lives are forever changed by. And I think the movie is in many ways, by the end, a reminder of how transitory life is, and that these allies and friends and partners with which we accomplish things are not here forever. And we should really cherish those things.
It's a hell of a drive.
She's a hell of a machine.
Oh, she's fast.
Could be faster. The 7-litre is sweet, but we still need a lighter chassis. I was thinking bonded aluminium. It's a ground-up rebuild, but if it works, we can lose a couple £100.
Well, what the hell are we doing here?
Let me take a shower, get a cup of tea, and a ham and cheese cob or something.
We'll get the bastards next year.
Doubt it. Doubt it.
No, we won't.
Ken, you got nothing to prove. Not to anyone that matters. You already won.